Chief of Real Estate Services at FSL, and that gives me great pleasure in that we get to do multifamily, single family, office space, clinics, adult daycare centers, group homes. It really gets to test our real estate chops, but nothing is as difficult as low-income housing tax credit, affordable housing. And you need experts like Steve and Brandy to guide you through it and really prepare you for it and start well in advance of it. So maybe I could just show you a little bit about what we've done.
Yeah, that should. Oh, is it on? No. Okay, here we go.
That's our mission statement. I promised to blow through these real quick. These are the kind of things we do, pretty much what I was talking about. We are heavily vested, thank you, in all over the state, 100% affordable, 100% accessible. Even our office spaces, our clinics, our adult daycares, our group homes are all accessible by wheelchair, some for visitors, some for people who live there. But we need more single-family homes. And so yesterday we had a great day. We kicked off a ground-breaking in Wickenburg, building 16 new homes, and it doesn't sound like much. It's like a grain of sand against the beach. But our families need homes, so we're very interested in that. And if there's anybody here who's interested in doing single-family nearby or on their church grounds, let me be the first to throw a headline. See. We've been at it a long time, started in 1982 with the Farm and Home program. It evolved into a program at HUD, and I'll save you all the speech about it. That kind of gives you a visual of where we're at. We're kind of all over the state at this point. The needs in Arizona are just, at the pace we're going, we'll never catch up with them. And it goes all the way back to the Reagan administration when they cut HUD from doing hundreds of thousands of units a year to doing 2,700. We just never, as a society, recovered from that. If you go back and you put I'm not picking on Reagan, but that year is kind of the watermark, and you go forward, we would have all the housing we need right now. We have about 11.5 million more units across the United States than we have now. But it's because we made that decision back then to cut HUD and cut the housing programs that HUD provided. And then later we lost stuff like Farm and Home, and we lost 202 and 811 and a few other great programs. So now to some good stuff. Some of the good stuff we get to do. So this is down in Tucson, and that is the Marist College. And it was the first fully integrated school in Arizona. Number 78 on the top historical structures to save. They tried, they used CDBG money, they tried investors, they tried over and over, and as you can see, you can barely see, there's steel girders holding the building up. So literally it's falling down and being held up by an exoskeleton, and it was about to fall down. And that's what we got to do with it. So we went in and we leased this building and ground. You got to remember, if you're leasing property from a church, or from anybody for that matter, you need to include the building and the grounds for $1 a year. And at the 30th year, whoever's sitting in my seat will work with the Diocese of Tucson and figure out what the next step will be. It very well could be that becomes priest housing, or that could continue to be senior housing, or it could become a school again. But what we've done is we went in and we put steel girders in there and put a new foundation underneath it, put a new roof on it, and redid all the floors, and it's just fantastic. You cannot do that in a vacuum. That's about $1 million worth of structure. So I think it was Rumsfeld who said, if you don't have a solution to a problem, go make it bigger. Make it bigger until absolute clarity presents itself. So we made it bigger. We went down the street, we bought a building, had a very patient seller. It was the Catholic Foundation of Tucson sold us an office building. We tore it down, and then we brought up that 7th-story. And you get to do some amazing things in these structures. For example, that's the basement of the Marist College. So if you're ever in Tucson, Violet needs a place to meet, this is it. It's just gorgeous. It's got a full kitchen, and up above it are 8 senior apartments. And this was a gymnasium, so that's 22 feet up. The next story is 16 feet up, and the next story is 14. So beautiful spans in the windows. It's tremendous. This is going back to the mid-rise. Instead of putting little community rooms at the end of each hallway, we put 2 rooms, 2 floors together, and made this huge spans, and then put a little balcony in the back of it. So when you're working with your architects, have some fun. Think about the lives of the people who are going to be there. And that is on 3 of our floors now in this building. So every Monday when staff comes in, we got to drag all the couches and the chairs back from the windows because the residents have pulled up and they're going to sit there and watch the world go by. And that's what we want them. We want them to participate.
And by the way, you have handouts on your table for all 3 presenters.
When you're working with a church organization, a couple of tips, if you will. One is know what the capacity of the church is. For example, in a Methodist church, I believe, if you were to sell this church, you'd have to give all the money from the proceeds to a future campus fund. If you lease it, then you can use the lease payment for operations. Every organization, you have to understand their bylaws. And then you have to do the community work you always do, which is go meet the neighbors, tell them what you want to do, and get their input early on. But you also have to start at the top and work down. And you have to identify people in that waterfall of participation, people who have the power to make it happen, and people who have the ability to understand what's happening. So we look for businessmen or businesswomen that will join in with us from the church or the temple or whatever it is, and work with us early on. It's risky business. You could have a pastor leave, a priest leave. You have somebody who in the church says, well, I can do it cheaper than they can. Give me their plans. And that's happened to us. And they failed. But they kicked us off the site, blah, blah, blah. So patience is a virtue, and in affordable housing, it's a must. So to put all these sources together, Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, low-income housing tax credits, geo bonds, went to the county and had them ruffle around in the couch and see if they could find us anybody. Came up with $604,000. Went over to the Rio Nuevo TIFs district. And if you're interested in TIFs, that's tax increment financing, you'll know they can only invest. They can't give, they can't loan. So we sold them 300 square feet of our sidewalk in front of our building for $350,000. I never intend to buy it back. And then you have to have mortgage debt. And today, you know, that's such a sweet looking performer there. You know, $1 million. Now we're looking at $3 and $4 million on our permanent debt because the sources up above are less and the expense of the construction is high. Now, fortunately, incomes are going up so we can afford more debt. But that impacts our residents. And we as an agency try never to charge anybody more than 40% of their income for housing, including utilities. In fact, we pay all their utilities. I don't know if we'll get to continue to do that. We want to, we'll try. And then we leased the college for $1 a year. So we pay that dollar every year. We have a 75-year lease with an option to extend. But we bought the other side. And that's something else to understand about nonprofit developers. We want to do good, but we have a mission. We want to carry it out. We want to carry it out far into the future. So making good decisions today, like owning a building that maybe 40 years from now has some value, and we can use the proceeds or the revenue from that to continue our mission, our primary functions, we're gonna try and do it. So if a seller says, well, I'll lease you the land for whatever, and I've got an option to go buy land and develop over here, I'm going to go buy and develop. Because now I've started an annuity, potentially, for the organization. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Well, hi everybody. Is it okay if I sit? Okay. Steve Capobres. I'm with an organization called Housing for Hope. So you're probably wondering, what is Housing for Hope? Well, Housing for Hope is the housing arm of Catholic Charities here in the Phoenix Diocese. And when you think about it, because I basically work for the Catholic Diocese, I represent the Catholic Church deciding to do something about affordable housing. And that's why I appreciate all of you here from your respective faith communities interested in this topic, because it's going to take more and more like-minded people who have a heart for this issue to get engaged. And that's what essentially we've done with the Catholic Church here in the Phoenix Diocese to try to start addressing this issue. And this happened 12 years ago. I have a housing background. I was thinking about this. I've been working on this issue now for over 35 years. I started my career in government, working for the governor at the time, who liked my work. They just created this housing office in the Department of Commerce, needed someone to run it. And they said, would you take it? And by the way, there's this program called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. We don't know what to do with it, but you figure it out. So I actually wrote the first plan for the state of Arizona on how to allocate these credits. And these credits have been the major source of developing affordable housing now since way back when we had the first plan in 1990. Give you a sense of my age.
He's the granddaddy of affordable housing in Arizona.
So, needless to say, back in the 90s, it was a lot of fun working in the legislature trying to advocate for housing. Getting some new programs at the federal level, trying to figure out how to make those work, and then working on creating the Arizona Department of Housing back in 2001. So that to me was the peak of my career, so I decided to do what most people do after they got tired of government, become a consultant. So I was a consultant, happily doing what I was doing for 10 years, and then Catholic Charities came a-knocking. They're like, you know, we really want to address this housing issue. Catholic Charities has been around for 90 years. They serve, you know, families, kids. They do a lot of things, but the consistent issue that they've heard from the families and the clients they work with is the lack of good affordable housing. So that's why the board decided we're going to do something. And they told me, well, you're the guy to do it. I'm like, really? I'm not Catholic. That doesn't matter. Come work for us. So they convinced me that this guy would be my partner. And because I knew Steve, and because I knew, well, I can lean on him, I don't know anything about development. I know how to get money, how money works, but this guy knows development. So they said, well, we'll partner with FSL, and we'll make it work. And so with the confidence of knowing I had this guy at my right hand, away we went. And I knew that Catholic Charities, the Catholic Church, was serious because they set aside $1.5 million. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot today, but 12 years ago, it was a lot of money. That if you're going to do this work, you've got to have some level of skin in the game to actually go out and try to put a deal together. So away we went, and we partnered with Steve, we partnered with others. We've done over a dozen projects. We now have about 850 affordable housing units we've developed in those 12 years. So we've been fortunate, we've been blessed. But I'm here to tell you that sitting here today, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Because it's not easy, it's not getting any easier. And don't kid yourself, if you want to develop a project, you better go out and hire some good people and know what they're doing, because it's a bear in this marketplace. And so what I wanted to do is share with you a little bit, and this is my handout if you have it on your table. I wanted to try to capture, in essence, the challenges we have when we go out and develop these projects, and some opportunities that exist out there for the faith community to help us overcome these barriers if we want to see more affordable housing developed. So I've captured, there's a lot when it comes to developing projects, but I've captured it in the 4 categories. I'm going to just highlight briefly each one. The first one is finding a site. It used to be that sites were plentiful, but not anymore. It's hard to find decent sites that are affordable, that meet these criteria. We have to be close to amenities, transportation. The funding sources that we go after tend to like these projects to be in revitalized areas, so we're pumping new investment in areas that need investment. Obviously, you need to be close to utilities, so we're not having to pay for those kinds of improvements. As Steve mentioned, if you can find cooperative sellers who are patient while we try to get the money, so we're not having to spend the money out of pocket to buy the land. And then it's always nice to have vacant land, because when you throw in buildings, the cost of demoing those buildings, or when you get federal money, you also have to pay attention to relocation. If somebody's in that building, you have to pay to move them, and that could be pretty expensive. So all those factors come into play when we try to find a site. You know, it's interesting, I get people all the time, here, we got some land up in Holbrook, will you take it? I'm like, well, that's nice, but I don't know if it meets these criteria. So that's part of the challenge. It's not just any land. We're looking for land that kind of fits these parameters. And so if you have a site, that's where you can help us. You can help us by selling the land to us. You can do a long-term lease of the land for us to develop on, or just contribute it as part of the project. The land costs tend to be about 20% of the cost of developing a project. So think about it, if you contribute the land or donate the land, you can bring the cost of the project down by about 20%. So that's finding the site. Secondly is working with the community. It used to be people love this stuff. Not anymore. I tell you, some of the community meetings are pretty brutal that you have with people when you are proposing a project. And so 9 times out of 10, if we have the zoning, that's critical, so we don't have to go through a zoning, a rezoning fight with the neighborhood. So getting the neighborhood to back you has been critical. And you know, it's interesting, because you do get a few comments about, well, we don't want those people in our neighborhood. But for the most part, they don't like height, they don't like the density you're bringing to the area, the traffic. Those are the things that tend to be the most vocal opponents for our projects. And then the planning departments working through the city entitlement process can be a bear. And it just seems like when COVID happened, nobody worked, or there were wholesale changes in planning department. It's just like, well, who's this? You know, if you know people, it helps. And sometimes you have to pick up the phone and make a call to get someone to pay attention to your deal. But you need planning departments, you need local governments who are really committed to working with you in a timely fashion. So how you can help us as a faith community, again, work with us to get those neighborhood groups to support us, who are the key champions out there that can become our advocates. And then also working at the political level. You know, I think it's getting better that most politicians like the issue, or at least are sensitive to the issue, but the more that we can dig through the layers beyond the city councils, at the commission level, getting those advocates are critical. Then you got to find the money. And you know, with COVID and some of the new allocations, money has kind of been raining lately, and that's been huge because we couldn't make these deals work without it. But that's not forever. It's going to go away. It's going to become harder and harder to find money. And the money we talk about, we talk about in terms of equity. That's money that you as the developer are bringing to the table, or the owner are bringing to the table. It's money you have in your pocket. It's grant money that you can get. So the more equity you can get, the less your mortgage, as Steve mentioned, and that's critical, because the less mortgage you have, the lower you can keep the rents. Because if you have a mortgage, somebody's got to pay that mortgage, and it usually comes from the rents. So if we can keep the mortgage down on these properties, you can keep the rents as low as possible to make the deal work. And so equity is getting harder and harder. These tax credits that we talk about, that's equity, and that's why they're so huge. There's not a lot of grant money to do anything other than maybe a small deal. So I've worked with the city of Phoenix, I've worked with Maricopa County. We've gotten some small grants to do 10-unit developments. That's about the most you're ever going to do with some of these block grants that are out there. So the name of the game are these tax credits where you can do some larger deals. So how can you help us with revenue? Well, again, contributing land. If you partner with a deal, sometimes a faith community has money in their eyes and they see money coming from the cash flow. All right, we can get paid every month or every year. Well, again, that only affects the amount of rent. If you expect some kind of payment, we got to charge more rent. Those rents are capped. Just be sensitive to that. I've been talking more recently with philanthropists who have money in the faith community. And I've been telling them, look, if you guys could just see the heart to not just give us money, but invest in low-interest loans for these projects, that would be a great benefit. So I'm starting to try to cultivate pools of capital which could be put into these deals in the form of some kind of low-interest loan that would help our projects tremendously. And then lastly, costs. Again, inflation and supply chain issues have been killing us. Every time you turn around, you get a change order. Okay, how much contingency we have left? Nothing, all right? How are we gonna make that work? And, you know, the one thing that I think was critical, and this was critical when we developed the programs at the state level, is you don't want to compromise on quality. There are some minimum standards that you have to make sure these projects have, so you're not just building up a shack that's going to fall down. So these projects are good quality. And so you never want to compromise on that. And so you're looking for more cosmetic things that you can do, nice things that would be nice to have, but maybe let's not do it to save money. And then availability of labor, subcontractors. Now the subcontractor market is getting better lately, and that's been good. And then just scheduling delays, working with the utility companies to come out and approve things or put in transformers has been a challenge. So how can you help us? Again, contributing, you know, a lot of things that we use in these projects, you can help us contribute to, like the playground equipment, furniture, those kinds of things we have to pay for. If you can help us with that, great. If we develop with a church, looking at sharing space could be a benefit. Relationships within your groups who are contractors, who may want to work with us. And then services. Services is, we're committed to providing services to create community in our properties. But you can't pay everyone to do that. It takes volunteers. And so getting for folks to work with us to creating community in our apartment projects is a big piece of what we do. So those are the challenges. Those are some of the opportunities. And again, I would welcome the opportunity to talk to any of you on how you can help us. So thank you.
What is your name again, please?
What is my name? Steve.
Steve.
Capobres.
Steve.
Capobres. I have cards. Capobres, by the way, means for the poor.
Thank you.
I learned something new.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, you've met me already today. Brandy Hotchkiss. I am a consultant with Leavitt, and I do a lot of consulting work with UMOM and worked with Darlene for many years developing UMOM's portfolio of affordable housing. So just a brief history, I did start my career with a for-profit developer that was a developer, contractor, and property management group. So that was helpful in the way that I learned a lot of different aspects of the industry, from construction standpoint, from the property management standpoint, and just how to navigate all of those different pieces to the puzzle and how to create this whole entire affordable housing and how to get it to the end point and operating. And I think that a lot of what I was going to say has kind of been done very wonderfully in a very comprehensive way by Katrina, and then you gentlemen have also done a very good job here today. So I think I'm gonna kind of pivot and talk a little bit about some other different things that maybe we haven't touched on yet. So as they mentioned, yes, this is a difficult thing, and it is a highly competitive thing. Tax credits are an extremely valuable resource, and they're very limited to each state. And in the competitive process that you have to go through every single year on a certain time frame, you only get one chance a year to apply for them. I don't think we've mentioned that yet. So you put all of this energy, all of this effort into one application that's due on April 1st. And you So in the terms of what we were talking about before, the feasibility studies, all the things that you work up with your architect, all the different land things that you've done, you order your market study, your appraisal, you have your pro formas, your numbers all set, you get your package ready, you submit on April 1st. what if you don't score well enough to win and you feel like, oh, you've wasted all of your time, all your resources, and you have to wait another cycle to apply. So that's another reason why this industry, this business is hard. It's that competitive. And we have to think about those things when we're doing this process, is how much time, how much money are we going to put forth to see, maybe are we gonna win, maybe are we not gonna win? Because it's not just a for certain thing. And that is the 9% tax credit round. I know we were talking before about the 9s and the 4s. The 4% tax credit is a rolling application, meaning you can apply anytime throughout the year. But again, that one has the bigger gap in the deal. An example of that is one of the deals that we worked on with you, Mom. As a 9% deal had a $1 million gap, as a 4% deal had an $11 million gap. So that is actually under construction right now. So we managed to cobble together $11 million of gap financing. But those sources are drying up now. I mean, it was great for a certain amount of time, but those sources are not going to be around for much longer. So thank you for your work, for getting different philanthropists involved and coming up with different gap solutions, because
They're Catholic.
Nice.
They only work with Catholics, so I'm joking.
No, I go to church. My son's getting his first communion next week. I'll let them know. So I think that that's another thing to consider, is it's not a for certain thing as well. And then another thing that it's so important to pick good partners. I think you can tell here that they have a really good partnership and established a good relationship over the years. There are very good quality people that you want to work with out there, and then again, there's some bad actors. But you want to, in selecting your architect, they have to know the business. They have to know what they're building. There are minimum design standards that we have to work with each and every different funding source that we're doing. These buildings do have to last for compliance periods. You want them to last. You want them to serve the populations in a really good way. You want them to be perfect for the families or the seniors or the people that are living there. You want them to be proud to live in that home. So, you know, you don't want to cut the corners. You want it to be a quality home while also being cost conscious and protecting the valuable resources that you have in the financing. So I think that when you're selecting your contractors, your architects, your engineers, you have to make sure that they have the experience in what you're building. What are some other things that we haven't touched on today? I think there's probably a lot of questions out there.
Yeah,
I want to open it up to some of those.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know.
I actually did one more thing I wanted to talk about. I reminded here. Property management companies. I don't think we've talked too much about that. That is a hugely important piece of the puzzle as well. They are so important with keeping the asset functioning at the end when you're leasing up the property. So when you're turning it over from construction to property management and lease up, it's such an important part to make sure that you're leasing up your units on time, so that you're delivering your tax credit to the investor, so that you don't have any negative adjusters or penalties, and that and then after that piece, that they're operating the building well, that you don't have a bunch of vacancies, that they're doing proper upkeep. Sorry. And if you have a bad, again, with partner selection, it's such a crucial part to have a good property management company as a good partner. So, okay.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and get started with some questions, because I know that this morning we covered a big area, and I'm sure everyone has questions, and please ask any question, you know, even though you think it might not be a silly question or whatever. Nothing is a silly question. I mean, I think that this is complex, and I know that I went to workshop after workshop thinking I understood it, and then I'd leave, and a week later I think, I don't got it. and not have to call and ask questions. So please, we need your questions. Jane?
Yeah, so Brandy, many of us, or all of you really, many of us here are churches that aren't trained in architecture and funding and construction and property management and all the things, right? So what would the benefit be for many of our organizations and communities of faith here with working with a developer? What part of this do you handle, right, when you're working with the church, and what part of it then would be the church's responsibility?
Well, I think that, from an aspect of if you partnered with someone like a UMOM or Catholic Charities or FSL, that's the stuff that we're used to doing on a daily basis in every development. That would be the part that we would handle for a development. That's the stuff that we're familiar with. We know all the people in the fields, and that's the stuff that we would likely take care of. I don't know if you have anything.
Well, yeah, hi Jamie, we've talked.
Yeah.
It just depends on how involved the church wants to be. For the most part, helping us with the neighborhood, getting support, the service piece, engaging, because again, we're not just developing housing, we're developing community. So what is this service delivery? How can the church help us with the people living there and engage with the people living there? Those are a lot of how a church can help us do this kind of work. Now, if you have local folks who may, again, like I said, a subcontractor who may want to be part of the project, even an architect, a civil engineer, we're all ears. It just depends. It can vary. But for the most part, and that's what I've told other churches I've talked to, we're going to handle everything and take care of everything so you're not out of pocket, especially cost. We'll handle the investment piece. It just depends on how engaged you want to be. And the financial benefit, there will be some financial benefit, and that can be structured what is important to the church as well. Whether it's some immediate financial benefit or some engaged long-term benefit, those terms can be also worked out as well.
Well, I guess I could add a little bit more. By the time you get a tax credit award and you're doing your plans and specs and getting your permits and your contractors on board, you're ready to break ground, you're north of $1 million cash out of pocket as a developer. And so we love the participation of people who can help, at the front end. But once that big snowball starts to grow, the developer really has to protect their interests at that point. Because if you don't make it to the finish line, you can't lose too many of those and keep in business. So you kind of hand over time. Early on, great participation with the church and with the neighborhoods, but as you get going, you really need to let the developer do their work because they've got a lot of this at stake. And I admire what Steve brought this, and you can get through that real quick and find out whether you have land of value. And then you could shop it out. You don't necessarily have to go with one of us, although we think you'd be incredibly wise to do so. But you could put it out for bid. You could see if you have a piece of property that meets those requirements, that's something of value.
Questions?
When you said the $1 million, how many units is that you're proposing to put together on that specific situation?
Well, the painful part of this is whether it's 35 units or 100 units, the investigation on the site, the architect's work, the engineer's work, planning, permits, all the work that goes into it, you're still $1 million. It could be $1 million towards 35 units, or it could be $1 million towards 100. But really right now, given where costs are and what the LIHTC can do, the low-income housing tax credits, you really need to be 60, 65 units. 60, 65 units. Yeah, you want the credits to carry as much of the burden of construction. And I don't know, you guys may have different opinion on that, but that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Sure.
Usually you say between like 60 and like 80.
Yeah, we're not hitting home runs anymore. We're just trying to get a bunt and get on first base.
So the average is 60, 65%.
For us, yeah.
Also, to you, you said the one credits are only open to bid once a year?
Yes,
So that's a very competitive field.
correct.
Yeah, usually there's like 3 applications for every one that wins. And again, these are, every one of these projects could be built. And every one of these projects has $1 million into it. So we're not talking just sloppily put together applications. These are 33 solid deals typically, or I think it's
Shovel ready.
shovel ready. And again, only for every 3 applications, only 1
I want to
wins.
get shovel.
And depending upon if the state has forward allocated credits from previous years and what they're going to allocate for this year, we don't actually know.
They don't pre-tell the budget for coming up?
Well,
It'll
it fluctuates.
They never tell you the exact amount.
What do you guys think for this year? Did they say something like 21, but then they might change it?
Is it ever less than the year before?
It is less than the year before. Last year they allocated about 36 million in the 9% round. And this year I think they wanted to play a little bit of catch up in getting back to what they should be allocating. But you never know what they're going to do. After they see what applications come in, they might say, hey, these are actually shovel ready. Let's forward allocate some more. We never really know. It's really fun.
Wally, did you have a question?
Yeah.
And
Thank you. I want to raise a political issue in question and want to know where you stand because right now we are in the middle of a legislative session that is trying to kill local zoning. I am a member of the City of Phoenix Board of Adjustment, so I hear the appeals and those sorts of things. And I'm not a big proponent of the planning and development department's process because it's slow and all those kind of things. And I come out of work with large land developers, so I've done this stuff for 30 some odd years. My question and my comment is, where do you all stand on this factor of taking away local development? And the reason I'm asking it is that in 2016, there was this issue of some lady in Mesa wanted to rent out a room in her house and she couldn't because the town planning department wouldn't let her rent a room in her house. And what came out of that was STR, Airbnb, VROB, and all of these short-term rentals in our neighborhoods that essentially made more people homeless. And I don't care what anybody says, I can argue with anybody in this room, but it made more people homeless because they got put out of their houses. But it started off with a story about some poor woman in Mesa who couldn't rent out a room, and that turned into a bill that took away took away local zoning processes. We could not, in the city of Phoenix, restrict short-term rentals. So I want to know where you all stand on these taking away the province of cities and towns to control zoning. Because a lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people in this room think that's something you ought to take away.
Well, I'm running because, no, I'm not running. Well, I can tell you back in the 90s when I worked a lot with the legislature, it was big local control philosophy. We never did anything at the state level without the sign off of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. And it was driven largely by the city of Phoenix. So I always had to sit down with the city of Phoenix and get them to agree before I proposed any legislation. So I can tell you that the foundation of the Arizona Department of Housing was built on that philosophy. In fact, they made us put in statute that we could not approve any of these LIHTC deals without the city approving it. That's actually written in statute. And that was, doing anything to try to get them to create the department, I had to go there. And so that is, I think, very strong still within the department. Now, what the legislature today does. I still think there's this very strong local control philosophy that permeates, at least what my experience in government is. And it should continue to be that way. I personally believe decisions are better made at the local level. You guys want to touch that?
I can just add something about how, for zoning purposes for Arizona Department of Housing, every single application that goes in on the April 1st deadline has to be zoned to build what you're proposing to build. So whatever, like you want to build 72 units, it has to be zoned to accommodate that without any waivers or variances required. So anything you're doing, it has to be done by that time. So they're very effective in that way, so that you don't just put together a project and then go to the neighborhood later and say, oh, I'm going to do this height and density waiver with no parking and all this stuff, and then you come away with it, the neighborhood says no, and all the different commissions say no, and then you can't build your project. And then you've sat there with an award of tax credits that you can't use and have to give back and wasted everyone's time and money. So.
I'm familiar with the two bills, one House and Senate you're talking about. And so I read through them both. I was asked to sign on with a group of folks. And ultimately, I chose not to, and I recommended to our agency that we not. There are aspects of the House bill that, you know, might make some sense. But there's enough resistance out there in affordable housing without creating, you know, kind of an umbrella of resistance, because we're taking control away. I like to think every one of our projects is welcome in the community we're in. And we go and we talk to folks, we sit down with a pad of paper and we say, what do you envision on this site? We want them supporting us, and we actually try and find champions in the community who'll step forward and support, you know, our vision at that point, not our drawings or our plans, but what our vision is. And there are some planning departments that probably don't need to name that, you know, I don't want to work with.
Yeah.
Because they're just,
Yeah.
you know, so it's just hard. It's just not worth the effort. Especially when there are communities that open up their arms and say, please, come in. You know, again, that Tucson project that we did with the two buildings, the Marist, the college and the Marist, the mayor at the time put a blue ribbon panel together of department heads to make sure our project made it through the process unimpeded. And so that's how we prefer. We don't always get that treatment, but it's nice when we do.
Yeah.
In fairness, it's Ted. In fairness to the group up front, I feel like the majority of congregations in the valley are dealing with fairly small parcels of land. And when I've been in front of the Planning Commission, I've been, you know, you heard me this morning, so I've been torn to shreds. You know, they don't really care. What, you know, you're a pipsqueak. I'm a pipsqueak, not you guys. You guys are bigger than we are. But I was a pipsqueak, and they wanted to basically push us around, and with comments like, which I said yesterday, you know, money is not our problem. That's your problem. You know, whether they put extra gingerbread on it or whatever. But there is a person who sits in this room today that completely saved my butt. Our project was going down. And the only thing that saved it is a telephone call I made, and this particular individual said, I'm gonna give you a phone number, you're gonna call it, and this lawyer's gonna help you. And that lawyer completely saved our project. And I would literally have lost it. And I would have lost it mentally first. I was very close, I was on the cliff. But I was gonna lose the entire project at the city level because of what was happening. And so the reason I say that is not to discourage. I so respect the knowledge that's in the room, certainly the people at the front of the room who've done this and know where the pitfalls are. But it is a very complicated process that if you don't know what you're doing, and I didn't, I think you can get in a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to do this. You really do have to have knowledge when you go in front of planning commissions. It isn't a learned process on the spot. Just some thoughts that direction.
That's just a great precursor to what I was going to ask. You know, Katrina mentioned the many hurdles that happen through each phase of the process, and you know, just continuously having to jump through those hurdles. I'm curious, which phase do you all find the most difficult, and what had you pulling your hair out? Which phase, and what was the particular issue?
Why are you looking at me?
I can tell you lately it's been the construction phase, because the construction interest keeps going up, and supply chain issues, and so lately it's the construction phase, and trying to keep the budget whole. That's been the most challenging.
I'd agree with that, and that we have a vision for what quality we want, the materials, the durability. We're going to have to operate these projects. FSL operates most of their own projects, and we have to stay within our budgets. Can't hand it off to our property management team. Is a problem. We want to give them something good, and when you start bidding it out, we call it value engineering. It just means making the project cheaper, less durable. So that's the hard part. Is giving out good stuff you know you should have, but the units can still serve their purpose in the value-added engineered form. They just won't serve it with any grace, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree with everything that they said. I mean, it used to kind of be the closing, if you have good partners, good financial partners, the closing process can be pretty smooth if you've been through it with them time and time again. Your documents are, you know, the same from the last deal, red line. It's a pretty easy process. Sometimes going through the city planning and development process can have you pulling your hair out because you don't know why they just won't respond and why they just take very long times to do things. But I think that the construction timelines that we have right now are definitely trumping all of those moments.
We got another question. We got another one up front here too, so.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I had mentioned an interest in cooperative housing, and that for me, that's more around the building community. But as you're talking about other revenue sources drying up, is that something that any of you are exploring or have thought about? So if some of the investment coming from some of the residents in order to fund it.
You know, we go with what the funders will allow. For the most part, they won't do that historically. Now, we have a property that is used in that capacity, but that was given to us, and we privately raised the money to develop it. I do think we need more of that. I'm hoping that there'll be more flexibility to allow us to do more of that, but I do think that's part of the solution for sure.
No, I was going to ask him, is the future now, is planning getting better to go through, or it seems to be still bottlenecks? I would say so.
So your question was, is planning getting any better at what they do?
Yes, over the years now.
It's still hit and miss. I mean, you think back 2008 and cities like El Mirage, there were a few that just subcontracted out their plant. And I joke in the office, I don't want to do business with anybody I can't reach out and choke. You got to keep moving. And if you've got a city planning department that subcontracted their work to a firm that may be in wherever, you know, you really have, there's a lot of exposure in that. So it's hit and miss still. Yeah. We have a planning attorney that we use, and she's good friends with the department head and knows the people who work there. And so if I'm getting in trouble, you know, I'll pay the fee. I'll get an attorney to go do that.
Right now, you can't get them on the phone.
The planning departments?
Yeah, planning departments. Yeah, answer the phone.
We got a question.
Or they go on vacation and they leave no sign that they're going to tell them.
That's right.
So a question, as Ted mentioned, many of us have smaller projects, like we're in the maybe 6 to 8 unit on some land we have at the church. And so we don't think we have a zoning issue because we're R7 already and we have 7.5 acres, so we can push our density to one side where the land is. That's our theory. But can you talk a little more about block grants and how we can do a good job of getting our scoring of proposals to really, get to the block grant level for a project our size?
For you doing it yourself?
No, not necessarily. It's just, we're not
Yeah.
going to be in your 60 to 80 unit window, period. So can you talk a little more about the other side of funding?
Again, I've gotten a couple of projects funded that way. One was through the state, a block grant, home block grant, 1.7 million they gave us to develop 10 units up in Sunny Slope. And there's a church that came and saw it. They love it. And we have an understanding, agreement to replicate the project on their site. And so we're getting ready. We hear that the city of Phoenix is going to come out with some money. And so that's the thing I tell people all the time is you almost have to you have a pipeline, you have certain deals that when the funding comes, well, let's go for it. And so that's kind of what we're working on, and that's some of the things I work on. So if the funding comes and we're ready to go, let's go. So we're doing it in anticipation that Phoenix may come out with some block grant money that could conceivably provide the money to develop 10 units. And since the project's already designed, we have the plans, it's going to be cheaper to do it. So that's kind of what I tell churches is, let's sit down, let's talk, let's design something. So if a funding opportunity comes along, we'll be ready to move. And you're right, if you have the zoning, that's critical.
We have time for one more question.
I was just going to say that in my business in commercial real estate, we tend to hire architects that can self-certify. And they have the ability to submit and get the whole permit done instead of going through the whole process individually. So I look for architects that have that ability. So just giving you my experience.
The question I had, I'm with the YMCA and we're looking at, we're in conceptual stage for affordable housing, but on the main floor, we'd like to do a build out of a health clinic, for example. Curious to know if you have any experience and maybe words of wisdom on how you can structure a partnership with a clinic or what I should be looking at or thinking about in going down this road.
I haven't worked on one of those in years, so I'd have to kind of reread the rules, but to do a clinic inside a light tech unit, you've got to be in a qualified census tract, and the clinic has to be open to the public as well. And so after that, we try and, when we partner with somebody, we try not to partner with us. Like, for example, we've done a project that helps adults with autism live independently in a couple of projects. And their design, built, and partnership is long lasting. And when we started with the state, though, we didn't identify, at the time it was SARC, we didn't identify them. We said we were going to work with developmentally disabled folks through an agency that serves their needs. And that way, if you get into it, you get a clinic provider, let's say it's Brazo, and something doesn't work out, they fall out, you bring somebody else in.
Perfect. So the other thing you can do if you co-locate, if you're doing a federally qualified health center, is you might also be able to access new market tax credits. We're not talking about it in this training because new market tax credits aren't for affordable housing itself, but they can finance things like space for federally qualified health centers or other things that you might co-locate in a project that has affordable housing.
New market credits provide 25% of the capital to develop it.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
New market credits provide 25% of the capital to do a project.
Okay. I think we're butting up against 1 o'clock. And thank you so much to the panel.
Yeah.